Welcome back to another deep dive. I'm your host, and today we are taking on a really intense mission. We're going to reconstruct a hidden, honestly terrifying chapter in the history of a place you might think you already know.
Right, we're talking about Laelith. And I'm thrilled to be here to provide the historical context because, the official narrative of this city is incredibly curated.
It really is. I mean, when you study the historical architecture of holy cities, there's always this overwhelming expectation of, like, absolute visible purity.
Exactly, a flawless facade.
Yeah. And with Laelith, it's almost pathological. You look at the surviving records, and they describe these pristine white marble terraces just relentlessly climbing toward the heavens.
It's all very intentional. The gleaming lake acting as a mirror for the sky, the priests walking around in these spotless robes.
Right. And at the very top, you have the Roi-Dieu, the god king, ruling with this unquestionable serenity. That's the postcard image of Laelith, right? We naturally want our sacred spaces to be clean and illuminated.
We do. The aesthetic of holiness actually demands that kind of strict categorization. It's a binary understanding of space. What is sacred gets elevated to the light, and what is profane gets pushed down into the dark.
Which brings us to the actual focus of our deep dive today. Because the moment you step past that pristine postcard image, the whole narrative just fractures.
It really does. The spiritual landscape of Laelith is literally built on top of a nightmare.
Yeah, you simply cannot have those gleaming terraces without the cloac festering right beneath them. It's like the city's repressed subconscious.
That's a perfect analogy. The cloac isn't just a sewer system. The historical texts show it functioning as a geopolitical reality. It's a lightless expanse of old drains, forgotten cellars, deep mud.
Just a massive memory pit.
Right. It's where the city shoves all its ugly truths, the architectural mistakes, the historical sins, everything the institutions up above agreed to, just, never mention again.
But the fundamental danger of a repressed subconscious, whether we're talking about a human mind or a metropolitan city, is that the things you bury down there, eventually they wake up.
They absolutely do.
And they demand attention. But in Laelith's case, this wasn't started by some grand, dark conspiracy. It was just the mundane greed of one guy scavenging in the dark.
A very specific guy. The chronicles point to an orc shaman named Krakho.
Right, Krakho, who belonged to this group called the Cult of the Taup.
Yes, the mole cult. And the sociology of this subterranean underclass is just fascinating. They prefer truth the way moles prefer daylight, buried, only known by touch, and kept far, far away from the sun.
Well, Krakho was digging around in the deepest layers of the cloac, right where the city's roots hit primordial bedrock. He claimed it was a sacred mission, but, the records suggest he was just a grave robber.
Oh, absolutely. Putting a theological mask on a robbery doesn't really change the act. He was just looking for ancient gold in the mud.
Exactly. So he breaches this sealed chamber. The texts say the clay was harder than bone. He finds some gold, sure, but he also finds this artifact that the chronicles just call the pearl.
An obsidian pearl. And the physical descriptions of this thing are deeply unsettling. It's described as being as black as the void between stars, like it consumed light instead of reflecting it.
Wow. And this thing is old, right?
Incredibly old. The lore predates Laelith entirely. It goes all the way back to the age of Tanith, the ancient settlement that used to be there.
So millennia before the current god king.
Exactly. And it wasn't just jewelry. It was a vessel. It housed an ancient earth demon that used to be worshipped on that exact soil. When Tanith fell, the entity didn't die. It was just compressed into this black glass, waiting in a state of sheer hunger.
They just needed a physical anchor to get back into the world.
Right. And Krakho was that anchor.
So Krakho puts the pearl around his neck, and he essentially just ceases to exist. The texts are super clear that this wasn't, a subtle possession. His physical form is violently rewritten.
It's a complete erasure of the host.
Yeah. So the thing that walks back up the stairs, out of the cloac and into the sunlight, is a human man. He's got clear eyes, this remarkably beautiful face, and crazy charisma. And he calls himself Guyz.
Guyz the speaker, defender of the common people.
Which is such a wild pivot. I want to analyze this because it completely upends how we usually view these historical threats. When you uncover an ancient, world-ending earth demon, you expect fire, brimstone, a monster tearing down the palace walls.
Right, a direct assault on the seat of power.
Exactly. But Guyz doesn't do that. He completely ignores the palace. He goes straight to the terraces of the lake and the working hand, and he just starts giving speeches. uses populism.
It's chillingly brilliant. It's an almost modern political strategy. The demon realizes that attacking the Roi-Dieu with fire would just unite the city against a common enemy.
Right.
So instead, it weaponizes legitimate societal grievances. The workers in the lower terraces were heavily burdened and economically exploited by the pristine priesthood above them. The demon doesn't invent a grievance. It finds a real bleeding wound in society and claims to be the only cure.
The surviving transcripts of his speeches are just fascinating. He preaches about the price of bread, the burdens of the working class.
Yeah.
He says justice is a locked storehouse hoarded by the elites, and he's the guy holding the key.
And the crowds adored him for it.
Adored him. Men who went to his rallies just to mock him ended up weeping and nodding along.
It was a calculated manipulation of mass psychology, but amplified by supernatural influence. City guards were sent to break up these crowds, and they would literally defect on the spot. They'd join the audience while still wearing the uniforms of the God King.
Wow. So he's executing this massive land grab without armies. He's just claiming the loyalty of the people.
Exactly.
But the establishment obviously noticed, right? The priests and the bureaucrats felt this ancient evil spreading, so they tried to take him out. And this is where the history reads like a dark comedy.
It really does. The state's lethal countermeasures fail spectacularly.
Yeah, they slip poison into his wine. Nothing. State-sanctioned magic. Just slides right off him. The detectives, the funers, they send professional assassins, and the attempts just defy probability.
Right. A seasoned killer's knife turns in his own hand.
A sniper's bowstring snaps. One account says a highly trained assassin literally fell down a flight of stairs and broke his neck before even getting to the tavern where Guyz was speaking.
It's incredible. The entity possessed this localized reality warping capability. It bent probability to ensure its physical survival.
But that raises a massive logical problem for me. If Guyz has this level of invulnerability, if assassins trip over their own feet, why bother giving speeches about bread for weeks?
What do you mean?
I mean, why not just walk through the front doors of the palace, let the guards' swords shatter against your skin, and physically remove the God King? It seems so inefficient.
Ah, right. Well, physical invulnerability doesn't mean you have systemic control. This entity is ancient, and it understands the metaphysics of power.
Okay, how so?
Taking a throne by brute force invites endless rebellion. It takes constant energy to maintain that dominance. The demon was still gathering its full physical strength, sure, but more importantly, it required the belief of the crowd.
So belief acts as a structural anchor.
Precisely. In Laelith, collective belief exerts a tangible gravitational pull. The demon doesn't just want the crown, it wants the people to actively demand that it takes the crown. By doing that, it roots itself in the civic subconscious. It bypasses the metaphysical wards of the holy city entirely.
Oh, wow. So that creates a terrifying paralysis for the city's leaders. The priests know a primordial earth demon is wearing a man's face, but they are legally paralyzed. You can't arrest a guy for giving an eloquent speech about bread.
Right. Guyz is operating completely outside the bounds of normal law and traditional magic.
So what does a state do when its internal security forces are defecting and magic doesn't work?
They realize they need irregular, untraceable external assets. People who exist completely outside the city's political web. Deniability.
Which brings us to our four travelers. The chronicles introduce them at sunset on the Chaussée du Lac. Let's look at their profiles. We have Lorien Arvet, a veteran soldier with serious survival instincts.
A man who knows professional violence.
Exactly. Then Morel Dast, a scholar who specifically came to Laelith to study forbidden texts. Perrin Vale, a rogue who charms his way through hostile environments. And Sister Helian, an observant cleric who sees right through the polite veneer of the city.
They were perfect because they were outsiders. No ties to the working hand, no loyalty to the God King, invisible to the bureaucratic surveillance that Guyz was probably tapping into.
Their introduction to the crisis is so abrupt. They're just walking down the street, probably smelling frying fish from the markets, listening to temple bells, and suddenly 20 heavily armed, jeweled city guards step out of the shadows.
It's a classic intimidation tactic, though the records note the guards themselves look terrified.
Yeah. Lorien goes for his sword, but Morel stops him. Perrin tries to make a joke, but Helena notices the guards are scared. Then this guy dressed in black steps forward. He's a funeur, a high-ranking detective, and he says, "You have nothing to fear. You are not, for the moment, accused of any crime."
For the moment, that phrase just strips away any illusion of safety.
Right. Perrin joked that he had a historical aversion to that specific phrasing, but they didn't have a choice. They're blindfolded on the spot.
And arrest in everything but name.
Exactly. The accounts describe this sensory maze. They're led down countless stone stairs. It gets cold. They smell damp cellars and hear subterranean water. When the blindfolds come off, they're deep underground, staring at this strange metallic compartment built into the rock.
A secret funicular. A private transit system belonging exclusively to the Roi-Dieu.
Right. And inside, they meet two men representing the fraying authority of the city. Lamb, the premier funeur, who is described as having the stillness of a knife resting on a table.
Great description.
And Ambrose, a high-ranking priest of the Bird of Fire, who just looks profoundly exhausted. Hands trembling, sunken eyes.
He's carrying the weight of an invisible war. So as the funicular starts ascending through these dark, vertical tunnels, Ambrose and Lamb give them the intelligence briefing. They admit the state is impotent, Guyz can't be touched.
But they have one fragile lead, right?
Yes, a copyist in the Library of Faith named Palimpsest. He was researching ancient texts and might have found the key to stopping the entity. They're conscripting the travelers to find this key, offering a huge reward and immunity.
It's this high-stakes briefing in the most secure environment in Laelith. But then, it is violently interrupted.
The transition from a controlled environment to a catastrophe is instantaneous.
It's terrifying. Lamb looks out the small window of the metal box and just says, with absolute dread, "We are not outside. I can still see the tunnel wall."
The chariot stops, the metal groans, and the main cable snaps.
Sabotage.
Exactly. Sabotaging the God King's private transit system requires astonishing access. This was a targeted assassination attempt.
The claustrophobia of that moment is wild. They're sealed inside a metal box, plunging in absolute darkness down a vertical shaft. No brakes. They hit the bottom, crash through ancient masonry, and burst into a deserted subterranean street.
The impact is devastating. Ambrose is thrown from the wreckage and killed instantly against the stone wall.
The rest are tangled in warped metal, concussed, inhaling stone dust. But the saboteurs didn't just rely on the fall. The street wasn't empty.
Right. Waiting in the dust cloud were ettercaps.
These spidery horrors with human-like malice. They don't even wait for the dust to settle. They swarm the wreckage. It's a brutal fight in the dark. Lorien is using his shield on pure muscle memory. Perrin is fighting with a boot dagger he doesn't remember drawing. Morel is trying to cast spells while choking on blood, and Heliane is dragging Lamb's unconscious body away from the serrated claw.
They managed to fight them off, but the strategic implications are huge. It proves Guyz has an intelligence network that has penetrated the absolute highest echelons of the inner circle. He knew the route, the time, and he had monsters waiting.
Yeah, Lamb recovers, looks at Ambrose's body and says, "Now, Guyz knows about you." Their anonymity lasted less than an hour. The timeline is suddenly incredibly compressed. They have to find Palimpsest before Guyz does.
So they make a rapid stop at the Temple of the Cloud to heal up.
Where Perrin tries to flirt with the clerics while actively leaning sideways so he doesn't fall over.
Typical rogue behavior.
Right, and then they head straight to the Library of Faith, which is described as this geological formation of bound knowledge. It's overseen by Cobb Deval, the chief librarian.
Cobb Deval is the embodiment of institutional inertia, a true bureaucrat.
Totally. Lamb demands to see Palimpsest, and Cobb Deval isn't concerned about his safety. He's just annoyed the guy missed his afternoon shift. He checks his ledgers and disapprovingly notes that Palimpsest went below.
And in Laelith, below means the lower roots of the library, the border of the cloac. It's where they keep outlawed rites and dead languages.
The environment is so oppressive that other copyists refuse to go down there. The air smells like sour stone and mouse dust. And it's haunted, but not in a dramatic way. It's an administrative haunting.
Right, because Laelith is obsessed with order. Even in death, the manifestations are bureaucratic.
Yeah, they see a ghostly quill floating in the air, writing, "You are lost" on a parchment. Morel just dismisses it as commentary. Then they see the custodians, these fleshless skeletons marching in lines, using massive feather dusters on the forbidden archives.
Lorien even makes a joke about facing deadlier threats, but rarely tidier ones.
Right, but that dark humor is a trap. It lulls them into a false sense of security before the real horror hits. Because at the end of a dark corridor, they find Palimpsest.
And it is a gruesome scene.
He's dead on the floor in a massive pool of blood. But his body is mutilated. Both of his hands have been severed at the wrists and are just gone. And his face is locked in this expression of unimaginable raw terror. Like he suffered something far worse than amputation before he died.
This is Guyz executing psychological warfare. Severing the hands of a copyist is deeply symbolic. He's telling anyone who follows this path that he will punish your specific method of opposition.
They notice a book is missing from the shelves. Cobb Duval identifies it as The Sacred City of Altalith by Bosco Fluche.
A name none of them recognize, but Cobb Duval mentions it might relate to the Utruz.
Who are the Utruz?
They're reclusive, semi-aquatic species living on the fringes of Laelith's territory, mostly ignored by the central bureaucracy.
Right. So Cobb Duval gives them the only reference material he has, a sketchy travelogue called My Adventures Among the Fish by Ermold the Black, which contains some fragile translation dictionaries.
So they have one tenuous lead, a missing book, and a flawed dictionary.
But before they could even process this, Guyz escalates. They leave the library, head back to their inn, and find the entire building engulfed in a towering inferno.
And this wasn't an accident. The Chronicles state it was a highly controlled blaze. Neighboring buildings were fine, but their inn was vaporized.
All their spare clothes, their coin, everything, reduced to ash. It's
phase 2 of Guyz's psychological assault. Strip away their sanctuary, impose a severe cost on their involvement, and hope they break.
But Morel is paranoid, so she had the dictionary hidden under her coat. Watching the fire, they realize they have absolutely nothing left in the city. The only path forward is to find the Utruz.
So they leave the stone confines of Laelith and head southeast. The Utruz village is built entirely over the waters of the lake on this precarious web of wooden walkways and rope bridges.
The Utruz are described as damp, patient, fish-like beings with large, unblinking eyes. And Morel warns the group about 3 incredibly strict customs they have to follow to get an audience.
Right, from Ermold's biased book.
Yes, Rule 1. Present a gift of a fish that has been dead for exactly 10 days, not 9, not 11, 10. Rule 2. Address the sage exclusively as Babul. Rule 3. Absolutely no laughing during the audience.
Which sounds completely farcical. Why prioritize a smelly prop when a demon is trying to take over the city?
Exactly what I was thinking. Why enforce these ridiculous hurdles?
Because for the Utruz, these rituals are a mechanism of survival. They carry an ancient generational trauma regarding a massive historical failure that forced them to abandon their underwater capital.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So when outsiders come, they don't just trust them. The dead fish, the title, the no laughing rule, these are psychological stress tests. If you can't hold back a laugh at an eccentric sage, you will absolutely shatter when faced with the horrors in their drowned temple.
It's a vetting process.
Disguised as eccentricity.
That makes so much sense. So they walk across these creaking walkways, reeking of rotten fish, and meet the sage, Tamal. He's sitting in a wicker chair, and perched right on his shoulder is a massive squawking seagull.
And Perrin almost loses it.
He does. His entire personality is finding humor in dark situations. His mouth twitches, but he catches Lorien's eye, swallows the laugh, and stays stoic.
By passing the test, they earn Tamal's respect and the truth. Tamal confirms Guyz as an ancient earth demon, but more importantly, he explains the primordial mechanics at play. You can't just stab an earth demon, you need an opposing elemental force.
A water demon.
Exactly. Only a water demon has the specific resonance to neutralize an earth demon.
And naturally, the statuette containing this water demon is locked in the deepest vault of the drained Utruz capital, at the bottom of the lake. Helian asks the obvious question, Babul, why don't your people just swim down and get it?
And Tamal's answer is heartbreaking. We swore never to return to the old capital. He doesn't justify it. It's just an impenetrable wall of ancient shame. They would rather let the surface world burn than face their historical failure.
So it's entirely up to the humans. But humans can't breathe underwater for hours. Tamal provides a solution, but it comes with a terrifying constraint. He gives them a pouch of bitter green weeds. If you chew it, it alters your physiology so you can extract oxygen from water for exactly 2 hours.
But the 2-hour limit is absolute.
Right. And taking second dose before the first one clears is instantly lethal.
That ticking clock radically alters the pacing of the expedition. It's no longer a careful archaeological dig. It's a desperate, timed plunge.
They get a boatman named Dipuan who doesn't speak, just grunts. He rows them out to the silver waters of the lake, drops a heavy stone anchor, and hands them sacks filled with stones.
To counteract natural buoyancy.
Yes. Then they have to coat their bodies in this foul, thick grease to survive the freezing cold of the deep water. They chew the bitter weed, their throats constrict, their lungs burn, and they plunge into the dark water.
The sensory isolation here is a masterclass in tension. Everything that made them effective operatives on land is neutralized.
Yeah, Lorien's speed is gone because of water resistance. Morel can't speak to cast spells. Perrin can't talk his way out of anything.
The magic weed forces oxygen into their lungs, but the environment is alien. Sound is totally different underwater. A sword hitting stone rings like a bell, but the slashing of a struggle is just a vibration in your bones.
They're communicating purely through crude hand signals, while Morel monitors this specialized water clock. They're swimming through these massive Cyclopean ruins of the Utruz city.
And the ruins are definitely not empty.
No. There are nixies watching them with glass spears, massive crabmen dragging prey, and then they get ambushed by a school of dragonfish.
An underwater skirmish is terrifying.
Lorien tries to thrust his sword, but the water slows it to a crawl. He only survives by using his shield. Perrin manages to stab one with his dagger, and the text describes the dark blood blooming upward in thick clouds, blinding them. They drive the fish off, but the time cost is severe.
How much time did they lose?
Morel checks the clock. An hour has already passed. Half of their absolute limit is gone just on the descent and one fight.
The pressure is exponential at this point. They finally locate the entrance to the inner sanctum, two massive onyx columns standing out in the open water.
Lorien steps through the space between the pillars, and he just vanishes from the water. The others follow. The magic of the columns acts as an airlock. They fall out of the water and crash onto the dry, ancient stone floor of a sealed chamber.
Getting back to dry, breathable air must have been jarring.
For sure. They're coughing up lake water, freezing in the grease. And the very first thing they see in this supposedly untouched Utruz temple is a piece of human graffiti.
Carved right into the wall.
Yeah, it says, Godefroy de Gilles, Knight of the Sun, shall destroy the evil within these walls in the name of his god.
The arrogance.
I know. But the best part is, right beneath it, some later traveler carved the words, of course, in elegant elvish script.
I love that. The cynicism tells you everything about the survival rate of knights in this temple, but the graffiti is just a distraction from the real danger. The Utruz use linguistic traps, not just physical ones.
Right. They find a solid stone door. Next to it is a lever mechanism with 4 symbols. A cloud, trees, a flame, and a fish skeleton with 6 bones. Above it is an inscription in ancient Utruz. Morel pulls out Ermel's dictionary and translates it as, the Frains forbid retreat.
Which is where academic reliance on flawed texts becomes incredibly dangerous.
Yes. Lorien, the pragmatic soldier, questions it immediately. He asks what Frains means. Morel says it means reins, like leather straps for a horse.
And Lorien points out the absurdity. They are in an underwater fish person temple. Why would they have a trap based on horse tack? It makes zero contextual sense.
It's a brilliant moment. Practical experience beats academic theory. Morel reevaluates the linguistic chain and realizes Ermold the Black didn't translate Utruz to common directly. He translated Utruz to an obscure dialect of Bronze Dragon and then to common.
That linguistic drift is deadly.
Very deadly. She realizes the word wasn't frains for reins, the root was aret's fish bones. The real translation was, the fish bones allow advance.
If they had trusted the first translation, they would have pulled the wrong lever and triggered something catastrophic.
But they select the fish skeleton lever, and the floor grinds open, revealing a dark corridor.
A huge vindication for scholarship, but also a warning.
As they go down the corridor, the temperature drops even more. The temple starts exerting this psychological pressure. The stone wall on their right becomes translucent like thick glass, and behind it there are shadows.
Shadow demons, imprisoned in the architecture.
The texts say they have vaguely humanoid faces, and they're mimicking human pleading, clawing silently at the barrier. Perrin's instinct is compassion. He wonders if the Utruz priests were monsters for building this, and if the shadows should be freed.
It tests the purity of their mission. But the decision falls to Helian.
Helian looks at the pleading shadows and makes this brutally cold calculation. She says, no, I am not certain if they deserve this fate. I am merely unwilling to improve their circumstances at the expense of everyone else's.
That is a profoundly heavy stance. She accepts the tragedy, but refuses to jeopardize the city for an unknown variable. It's harsh pragmatism.
And it gets tested immediately in a much more personal way. They move past the wailing walls into a new chamber. Perrin falls through a concealed trapdoor onto a mummified burglar.
But the burglar has the item they need. The missing book, the sacred city of Altalith.
Right. And the book reveals the key to the final vault is hidden in a renegade priest's private library chamber at the end of the hall. Lorien cracks the door to that chamber open, and the narrative pivots to pure horror.
What do they see?
Sitting at a massive stone desk is a demon named Ershtarek. Massive, hunched, skin-like diseased stone. But it's not guarding the room. It's entirely absorbed in an act of profound cruelty. It's holding a glowing crystal sphere, and trapped inside is a misty, writhing shape. A human soul.
Specifically the soul of palimpsest, the copyist.
The man whose hands were severed. The physical murder was just a prelude. The demon is trembling with sadistic pleasure, watching his soul suffer eternal agony.
And the key they need is on the bookshelves directly behind this demon.
Yes. Heliane is pushed to her breaking point. She's a cleric dedicated to salvation. She grips her holy symbol until her knuckles bleed and whispers, "We cannot leave him, we must save him."
But Lorien points out the brutal truth.
Morel checks the timer. They have roughly 40 minutes of air left. If they fight a demon of that magnitude, they'll drain their time if they even survive. They literally cannot fight it.
This is the moral crucible of the expedition. Heliane has to deliberately abandon a terrified soul to eternal torment to save the city. She has to participate in profound evil through inaction.
It's a wound she'll carry forever. She makes the choice. She casts a spell of supernatural silence. All sound-breathing, armor, footsteps ceases. They become acoustic ghosts. Perrin creeps into the room, slips behind the demon, frantically searches the shelves, and finds a small ivory tube containing a metal scroll.
The tension of that silent theft must have been excruciating.
Unbearable. But the emotional climax is the retreat. As they back out, Heliane looks back. The misty face of palimpsest inside the crystal seems to turn toward her, recognizing her, and she has to physically force herself to close the door and walk away, leaving him to scream silently forever.
That decision just strips away any illusion of glory. It's a brutal chore now.
They break the seal on the tube. The scroll has a riddle for the final trials. If you hesitate before the path to follow, choose clumsiness, but know that you must pass through death.
Morel's expertise comes in again. Clumsiness in the ancient dialect translates to maladresse, which means left.
Perrin manages a weak smile, saying his life is defined by poor choices and clumsiness, so they take the left corridor. And what follows is a relentless gauntlet. We call it the road through death.
The temple systematically attacks their focus, their greed, and their endurance.
Exactly. First, a room with lifelike frescoes of painted animals. If you look at them too long, the paint dimensionalizes and becomes physical. Lorien realizes it just as a painted wolf snaps its jaws. He grabs Morel, covers her eyes, and forces everyone to run blindly, staring at their boots.
A brutal test of focus.
Then they burst into a vast treasury. Piles of gems, magical staves, star metal weapons. For people who just had everything they own burned to ash, the temptation is staggering. But Heliane just looks at them and says 2 words. 2 hours.
They have to exercise agonizing restraint. Taking anything would literally drown them.
Finally, the Abyss Bridge. An 80-meter chasm in pitch darkness, crossed on a crumbling 1-foot-wide stone span. As they step on it, a violent vortex of wind tries to blow them off. And doom bats, massive creatures with razor talons, drop from the ceiling.
Combat on a 1-foot ledge is a nightmare.
Lorien and Perrin drop to their hands and knees, crawling, stabbing blindly into the dark. Perrin actually slips. He's dangling by one hand over the void until Lorien hauls him back up. They cross it through sheer bloody endurance. Morel checks the timer. Less than 20 minutes of air remaining.
They are battered, traumatized, morally compromised, and completely out of time, and that's when they breach the final prison.
The final chamber has a massive stone sarcophagus in the center. Guarding it is a necrophidius, a horrifying construct made of human bone and serpent sinew. But it doesn't bite them. It sways in a hypnotic dance.
It generates a hypnotic field, weaponizing their own exhaustion. It saps their will to fight.
Lorien's sword lowers. Perrin smiles and glazes over. They just want to sleep. But Heliane is still carrying the guilt of abandoning palimpsest. She refuses to let that sacrifice mean nothing. She physically strikes herself across the face, hard enough to draw blood, using the pain to break the trance. She shouts a prayer, snapping the men out of it, and they furiously smash the bone serpent to pieces.
With the guardian gone, they open the sarcophagus.
Inside is a 1-foot-tall stone statuette of an incredibly ugly Medusa, looking both furious and manic. Lorien lifts it out.
And the moment he does, the temple judges them. The Utruz built an ultimate failsafe.
The ceiling cracks with a sound like breaking bones, and the entire immense weight of the great waters punches through the roof. It's an instantaneous flood. The chamber fills with freezing black water in seconds.
It wasn't just a trap, it was structural consequence. The Utruz designed it so removing the demon erases the architecture forever, ensuring nobody can ever misuse the ruins again.
Brilliant, but lethal for our group. They're caught in the updraft, rocketing toward the surface amidst tumbling boulders, and their time is up. The magic weed fails. The freezing cold paralyzes them, and their lungs start burning with terrifying intensity. They are seconds away from drowning.
The margin of survival is impossibly thin.
Just as the surface light becomes visible, thick ropes drop into the water. Dipuan, the silent boatman, is right above them. He hauls them over the side like a heavy net. They collapse on the deck, coughing up water, clutching this ugly stone hope.
But there's no time to rest. While they were underwater, the timeline in Laelith accelerated.
They rush from the docks straight to the plaza of the Three Ends, and it's a scene of impending catastrophe. Guyz is on a raised platform, delivering a fiery speech to a packed mob of laborers and defected guards.
He's dismantling the God King's authority, saying the establishment demands the starving call their hunger patience. He's about to trigger a bloody civil war.
The travelers, bleeding and covered in subterranean filth, push through the mob. Someone recognizes Lorien's armor. The crowd turns violently paranoid, thinking they're elite assassins. A stone hits Lorien in the face.
It's the breaking point.
Morel steps forward, pulls out the Medusa statuette, and holds it high. Guyz looks down, and for the first time, his perfect human mask slips. He looks utterly panicked. He recognizes it.
The Earth Demon recognizes its primordial counterweight.
The statuette cracks in Morel's hands and bursts into fragments. But the water inside flashes into the air, expanding into a massive, towering water demon made of lake water and fluid serpents. At the same second, the black pearl on Guyz's throat ignites. His disguise melts, revealing the horrific, stone-skinned earth demon.
It's a grinding collision of foundational elemental forces.
The atmospheric pressure forces everyone in the square to their knees. People are sobbing, clutching their ears. A hurricane of wind and dust rises, extinguishing all the lanterns. The sound of grinding stone and boiling water is deafening. And then it just ends.
Absolute neutralization.
Total silence slams back into the square. The demons are gone. No trace. And standing on the platform is Krakno, the terrified little orc scavenger in a muddy robe.
The crowd's reaction here is such a profound sociological detail.
It's so realistic. They don't pray for forgiveness or cheer the travelers. They just stop. They look ashamed and they quietly disperse. By the next morning, half the city is rewriting their memories, aggressively claiming they always knew Guyz was a fraud.
It's the ultimate defense mechanism against collective embarrassment.
Krakko is arrested. The administrative cleanup begins. Lamb sanitizes the narrative. Ambrose gets a state funeral blamed on an engineering failure.
Palimpsest gets a magnificent memorial in the library.
But Helion refuses to attend, knowing where his soul actually is. The Utruz refuse any thanks. Tumul just feeds his seagull. And Lamb pays the travelers in untraceable coin, practically begging them to leave Laelith immediately.
A holy city never wants to be reminded of the foreigners who waded through its filth to save it.
Which brings us to the final image. The travelers are riding on the elevated road, looking back at Laelith in the morning sun. The city looks pristine again. The burn marks are scrubbed clean, the white terraces are shining, the illusion is restored. Morel looks at it, and Perrin asks, "Do you think the demons destroyed one another?"
And Morel uses the exact words of the Utruz sage. Neutralized, not destroyed.
Lorien asks, "How long then?" And as the great temple bells ring out across the water, making the city sound safe and holy, Helion listens and answers softly, "For a while."
It's chilling. Problems of this magnitude, demons, societal resentments, buried sins, they're never truly solved. They are merely paused in temporary equilibrium.
And that leaves you with an incredibly provocative thought to ponder. When you look at the stability of your own world, the architecture of your cities, the permanence of your institutions, how much of that peace is just a temporary neutralization of opposing forces? How many historical nightmares are just waiting down in the dark for a scavenger to stumble upon them? Because when it comes to the terrifying things we bury in the dark, for a while is the closest thing to peace that wisdom dares to promise.